Welcome to the Enchanted Library, where we turn the pages of books, beautiful and old, living and magical. It's time to curl up, get cozy, and join us on an adventure. Today we're reading from the Heroes of Asgard by Annie and Eliza Keary, Part 24, The Winged Giant. "It is as I thought," said Odin, as he watched the eagle's enormous bulk brought out against the sky. "It is Thiassi, the strongest giant in Jotunheim, who is presumed to show himself in our presence. Loki has only received the reward of his treachery, and it would ill become us to interfere in his behalf. But as the monster is near, it would be well for us to return to Asgard, lest any misfortune should befall the city in our absence." While Odin spoke, the winged creature had risen up so high as to be invisible even to the eyes of the Aesir, and during their return to Asgard, he did not again appear before them. But as they approached the gates of the city, they were surprised to see Loki coming to meet them. He had a crestfallen and bewildered look, and when they questioned him as to what had happened to him since they parted in such a strange way, he declared himself to be quite unable to give any further account of his adventures than he had been carried rapidly through the air by the giant, and at last thrown down from a great height near the place where the Aesir met him. Odin looked steadfastly at him as he spoke, but he forbore to question him further, for he knew well that there was no hope in hearing the truth from Loki, and he kept within his own mind the conviction that he felt some disastrous result must follow a meeting between two such evildoers as Loki and the giant Thiassi. That evening, when the Aesir were all feasting and telling stories to each other in the great hall of Valhalla, Loki stole out from Gladsheim and went out alone to visit Iduna in her grove. It was a still, bright evening. The leaves of the trees moved softly up and down, whispering sweet words to each other. The flowers, with half-shut eyes, nodded sleepily to their own reflections in the water, and Iduna sat by the fountain, with her head resting in one hand, thinking of pleasant things. "It is all very well," thought Loki, "but I am not the happier because people here can live such pleasant lives. It does not do me any good, or cure the pain I have had so long in my heart." Loki's long shadow, for the sun was setting, fell on the water as he approached, and made Iduna start. She remembered the sight that had disturbed her so much in the morning, but when she saw it was only Loki, she looked up and smiled kindly, for he had often accompanied the other Aesir in their visits to her grove. "I am wearied with a long journey," said Loki abruptly, "and I would eat one of your apples to refresh me after my fatigue." The casket stood by Iduna's side, and she immediately put in her hand and gave Loki an apple. To her surprise, instead of thanking her warmly, or beginning to eat it, he turned it round and round in his hand with a contemptuous air. "It is true, then," he said, after looking intently at the apple for some time. "Your apples are but small and withered in comparison. I was unwilling to believe it at first, but now I can doubt no longer." "Small and withered," said Iduna, rising hastily. "Nay, Asa Odin himself, who has traversed the whole world, assures me he has never seen any to be compared with them." "That will never be said again," returned Loki. "For this very afternoon I have discovered a tree in a grove not far from Asgard, on which grow apples so beautiful that no one has seen them will ever care again for yours." "I do not wish to see or hear of them," said Iduna, trying to turn away with an indifferent air. But Loki followed her and continued to speak more and more strongly about the beauty of this new fruit, hinting that Iduna would be sorry that she had refused to listen when she found all her guests deserting her for the new grove, and when even Bragi began to think lightly of her and her gifts. At this, Iduna sighed, and Loki came up close to her and whispered in her ear, "It is but a short way from Asgard, and the sun has not yet set. Come out with me, and before anyone else has seen the apples, you shall gather them and put them in your casket, and no woman shall ever have it in her power to boast that she can feast the Aesir more sumptuously than Iduna." Now, Iduna had often been cautioned by her husband never to let anything tempt her to leave the grove, and she had always been so happy here that she thought there was no use in his telling her the same thing so often over and over. But now her mind was so full of the wonderfully beautiful fruit, and she felt such a burning wish to get it for herself, that she quite forgot her husband's commands. "It is only a little way," she told herself. "There can be no harm in going out just this once." And, as Loki went on urging her, she took up her casket from the ground hastily and begged him to show her the way to this other grove. Loki walked very quickly, and Iduna had not time to collect her thoughts before she found herself at the entrance of Always Young. At the gate, she would have gladly stopped a minute to take breath, but Loki took hold of her hand and forced her to pass through, though at the very moment of passing she half drew back, for it seemed to her as if all the trees in the grove suddenly called out in alarm, "Come back, oh come back, Iduna." She half drew back her hand, but it was too late. The gate fell behind her, and she and Loki stood together outside the grove. The trees rose up between them in the setting sun and cast a deep shadow on the place where they stood. A cold night air blew on Iduna's cheek and made her shiver. "Let us hasten on," she said to Loki. "Let us hasten on and soon come back again." But Loki was not looking on. He was looking up. Iduna raised her eyes in the direction of his, and her heart died within her, for there, high up over her head, just as she had seen it in the morning, hung the lowering dark wings, the sharp talons, the fierce head looking at her. For one moment it stood still above her head, then lower, 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 the huge shadow fell. And before Iduna found breath to speak, the dark wings were folded round her, and she was borne high up in the air northward toward the gray mist that hangs over Jotunheim. Loki watched till she was out of sight, and then returned to Asgard. The presence of the giant was no wonder to him, for he had in truth purchased his own release by promising to deliver up Iduna and her casket into his power. But as he returned alone through the grove, a foreboding fear pressed on his mind. If it should be true, he thought, that Iduna's apples have the wonderful power Odin attributes to them, if I among the rest should suffer from the loss. Occupied with these thoughts, he passed quickly among the trees, keeping his eyes resolutely fixed on the ground. He dare not trust himself to look around, for once, when he had raised his head, he fancied that, gliding through the brushwood, he had seen the dark robes and pale face of his daughter, Hela. Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review on your favorite podcast platform and share our podcast with a friend. Visit our website at www.enchantedlibrary.net to see our past books or to connect with us on Facebook. If you'd like to support the work we do, you can visit our Patreon page at patreon.com/enchantedlibrary. We appreciate your support. Until next time, friends, happy reading.